What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to For the Millie. Very exciting show for you guys here today. There were some massive payouts on Pick Six last night. It was also one of the best ownership projection weeks that we've ever had. We are typically the leaders in ownership accuracy every single week of the season, but yesterday was to a degree we haven't seen before. So we'll talk through why that is. Is it going to continue? We'll talk about why we had such massive payouts on Pick Six tonight, and why maybe we can do the exact same thing today. So, TwoGun, how was your football Sunday?
Not good. Now, on the one hand, I at least knew what other people were going to do because of y'all's ownership projections were good. But just some of my ideas were bad, and some ideas just kind of got unlucky. Like, my grand theory was Bucky Irving's going to not be as good as, like, one of the wide receivers on Tampa, and I went with Mike Evans. Whoops.
Yeah.
Whoops. That's all I can say is whoops.
Yeah. There was a lot of that yesterday, I think. So like another one was, or similar story where I had a lot of conviction on the Detroit Lions defense. I had that conviction in large part because we expected the Dallas offense to be a lot more popular than the industry did. Guess what? Prescott was like 25%, Lamb 35%, Tolbert 30%. We nailed that ownership. The Detroit defense was spectacular, 18 DraftKings points, and yet the 45% owned Tampa defense scores a touchdown on the opening drive. So the Detroit 18 fantasy point game, it mattered, but it just didn't matter as much as it could have. So yeah, lots. I felt like
kind of bailed out there. They got bailed out on Bucky Irving, basically getting all this production in the fourth quarter. They got bailed out on the Tampa defense, obviously, while that fumble six, that could have been an incomplete pass.
Should have been an incomplete pass, yeah.
Yeah, so, but that's just football. That's the way it is. And I'll maintain it is not smart to be taking 30% owned defenses.
Yes.
We could talk about Bucky Irving, whatever, but like that's to me more defensible, way more defensible to be at or, whatever people are doing there. But 30% chalk defenses, no. It got bailed out. That's all I'm going to say is it got bailed out.
Yeah, there was a lot of, I think the coolest thing about the ownership success yesterday isn't just how accurate we were and how much more accurate we were than the industry. It's how many like very clear and obvious profound examples there were of you would have made a different decision if you had FTN's ownership. So in addition to stacking Dallas, which obviously look, out of every 10 people you meet who play DFS, 3 or 4 of them were stacking Dallas yesterday. None of them probably would have if they had known they would be 30 to 35%, which you would have with our ownership. Second of all, 2 running backs in particular that the industry had around 15%, 20%, J.K. Dobbins and Najee Harris. We had it like 3% or something crazy low. Both of them came in 3 to 5%. Both of them had really good games. So, yeah, there was – in hindsight, it's one of those where like, man, if all I did was play into the biggest ownership discrepancies, I would have had a huge day. I still had a solid day. Stacked the Eagles, was right about Hurts and A.J. Brown, was right about Derrick Henry. Just didn't have the necessary pieces around that. And as you said, just enough chalk hit that some of my really good calls weren't properly rewarded.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes what people think will be more like Najee Harris, like there's a reason he would be, you could see why people think they would be used more.
Yeah.
And maybe that reason was good. And then people like overthink it. And then that's why it goes lower. And sometimes like having the wrong information will kind of result in that overthink.
Yeah. All right. A little bit of housekeeping for today's show. We are going to talk Pick Six quite soon. We're going to look back at last night's slate, see if we can help explain why the payouts were 400x for a 6 of 6. It's not as simple as, well, a bunch of random stuff didn't happen or did happen. There's a clear reasoning to it, and we can then apply that to tonight's Pick Six. We will close with some Showdown thoughts. I happen to think tonight's Showdown is as straightforward of a Showdown slate as we have had in quite some time. But before we get to that, please help us get likes on this show, subscribe to the channel. You're watching on YouTube here. Make sure you jump in there, like the show, and appreciate you, Chicago Lansky. We love first timers. Hopefully, you like what you hear, you like what you see, and if you have any questions throughout the show, just drop them in this chat. We're going to answer questions out. TwoGun, let's move to last night's pick six slate.
I'm drinking a Sonic, just a like a Coke Zero with lime and diet cherry and shit.
Here you go.
I got to keep the caffeine going. I'm up since like 6 a.m. It's just this time of year. I have to have a constant caffeine injection. It's just constant.
Mike's probably just taking notes, TwoGun. He wants to be able to do. He wants to do everything that you do, so he can make 100K on this Showdown slate, just like you do.
Okay, hopefully we'll see.
All right. Last night's pick six. I think you and I agree that the number one reason why 6 for 6 was so low was that Jamar Chase was super popular, ended up going under. By the way, major letdown for me on Underdog yesterday. I was Jamar Chase over 72.5 receiving yards away from a 6 for 6 that I think would have paid out like $6,000, something along those lines. And he ends up half a yard short. So I'm very tilted about that, but at least it led to some major.
God punishing you for playing a non-pick six type place, Alex. As well. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Maybe, but it's been a successful season over there. We're continuing to do Underdog and Prize Picks and Boom Fantasy as well in the Pick'em channel of our Discord. So if those are the games that you love, go in there, check those out. But also make sure you're trying Pick Six. As TwoGun says, it is a better game. It's not just a different game. We both agree it is a better game.
It's the good game because you're playing against other people, whereas those games are evil and they're against the house. The house is not going to let you win much. You're going to have to finagle things and, try to not and fly under the radar. And they're going to screw you. You don't ever get 400x or even 50x on these other sites. When you have the opportunity to play against other people, you always take it if it's roughly the same thing. I understand it's not quite the same thing in some ways, but for most people, it's pretty much the same thing.
Yes, there are props we like tonight, the picks we like tonight. We're going to get to those, but first we want to talk through why payouts were so high on last night's slate, and then we'll be able to apply that to tonight's slate. So the first thing, Jamar Chase, super popular. He goes under. But I think it was a lot more than that, TwoGun, where we see popular picks fail a bunch. Like if you remember that Giants-Cowboys showdown slate, we had Singletary as the most popular going over his rushing total. We started our pick six plays with his under on the rushing, and that was kind of the only chalky one that failed in that game. And still the 6 for 6 payout that I got that night was 36x instead of the expected like 22 to 24x. So the fact that I got to 400x means a whole lot else was going on. And I think the main thing is that more and more of the field is now stacking, and the stacks were interrupted. And what I mean by that is there wasn't a team where the quarterback and two pass catchers, the predictable ones, all went either over or under together. On the Cincinnati side, Burrow went under, Chase went under, T. Higgins went over, and on the New York side, Wan'Dale Robinson under, Daniel Jones under, Darius Slayton over. So I think the thing that we saw last night is when those stacks get quote unquote interrupted and don't go in any one predictable way, that's when we're going to get those big payouts. And I think there's an opportunity to do that again tonight. So before we get into that, what are your thoughts there? Do you have the same read on the situation?
Yeah. So look, I try to spend some, you have no idea like how insane my schedule is at this time of year, because keep in mind, I have a full-time job as a stock trader as well. And I have 3 kids, and I got some. So I have only so much time to deal with everything. But one thing I try to do every week is look at what other people's pick six choices are. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference between the main slate. We have like 4 to 6 plus games, and in these one-offs. On the main slate, it almost always makes more sense to correlate everything one way or another, because there's just so many games and so many things to choose from. But in these one-game things, not always. But it's you don't have to anti-correlate, but you don't have to choose to correlate every single pick.
Yeah.
You can go about a game flow to where it makes sense, but you're not just like throwing stuff at a fan. And
I think there's also a way to think through it where you're finding instances where something is possibly positively correlated, but on the surface it seems like it wouldn't be. And so I think the Bengals are the perfect example last night. I'm going to bring up the box score.
I also want to bring up sometimes some things are so chalky that you don't realize that, like, I couldn't quite tell, but I think like 90% of people were on Jamar Chase more and 10% were on Jamar Chase less. So it's just one of those things where like one guy will just entirely kill the entire thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think let's also, if you take a look at this box score, so we kind of brought this up already, but Burrow went under on his passing yards, Chase went under on his, T. Higgins went over on his. And this is the kind of thing I want to talk through because New York had a very, very specific game plan for Jamar Chase. They were playing a lot of man coverage and they were double teaming him. They had one guy just covering him tight and lots of press coverage. And then they had a safety over the top on almost every single passing play that Cincinnati ran. And so what that created was an instance where Burrow goes under because the explosive play that he relies on with Chase so much just wasn't there. They had that like crazy cool 33-yarder where it was just very much, improvising after the pass rush got there and just finding a way to get the ball downfield to Chase. But for the most part, the explosive play that we saw a week prior against Baltimore, the 41-yarder at the end of the half, the 70-yarder on the quick screen, just wasn't there. And because of the way they were taking that away and the way that they therefore made Burrow and Chase go under, it also meant T. Higgins got a lot of single coverage and Burrow had a lot of easy completions to T. Higgins. So on the surface, you wouldn't think, oh, if I have Burrow under and Chase under, T. Higgins over is well correlated to that. It usually wouldn't be. But if you're telling the story of New York sells out to take away the explosive play from Chase, suddenly the Higgins over does correlate well. And that's the kind of story that I think we can tell tonight. So any closing thoughts here before we get into tonight's Pick 6 slate, TwoGun?
I don't know. Not really. I just think it's the one thing I mentioned this on Twitter is this is just even more reason to have more lineups, especially if you start doing a significant amount of money on these things. You're like doing more than $100 per pick set. Like if my $500 pick set hit all six, it would just swamped it, and it would have been like I'm basically splitting it with myself.
Yeah.
I'm not saying do $1 a pick set, but if you're kind of aiming for something kind of weird, like I'm doing a max of $200 per pick set now. Maybe, and I'm doing more $100 pick sets. I'm not like going like down to $50 or anything like that. But I think, especially for your more weird stuff on these island games. Now, for the main slate, it doesn't really matter as much. But I just think it makes more sense to fire more bullets. Don't try to be like single lineup hero with this sort of situation. It's a different game from salary cap DFS, and we need to like respect that. And that's just part of it.
For those who are new to the show, TwoGun's units are a little bit different than everyone else's. When TwoGun is talking about doing $200, $100 at a time, for someone who's spending $100 on the
divide by 100. Divide by 100.
Yeah,
maybe 10.
Right. I was going to say if you're somebody who's doing $100 for your pick six investment in a night, you're maybe doing slips that are $5 at a time, $10 at a time. Maybe if you feel really strongly about something, you can go up to $25 at a time and just do 4 of them, something along those lines. But to TwoGun's point, because we're trying for something that is really unlikely to happen, you want to tell like 4 different stories or 10 different stories. And each one of those stories individually is really unlikely to happen. But the likelihood that at least 1 out of those 10 happens is actually fairly good. And it's better than the 400x payout that might be waiting for you at the end of it. So with that, let's jump into tonight's Bills and Jets matchup. And the thing that I want to draw people to immediately, if you bring up our DVOA adjusted fantasy points against data, let me blow this up a little bit for you guys.
Oh, Alex, I got the data from last night on this Jamar Chase. And keep in mind, it's different depending on when people placed it. is
Mhm.
different. Like it could be 73.5 or 75.5.
Yep.
But I think 76.5 was the most popular one. Under was 44 in my thing. Over was 387. That's almost 90-10 on one,
Yeah.
on one type of selection.
Yep.
So when that happens, like, yeesh.
Yeah, it swings everything. And to that point tonight, check this out. Buffalo, we have as a big running back funnel. Might not expect that, but plus 39% production to opposing running backs. That is the second best running back matchup. Wide receiver ones, negative 53%. That is the toughest matchup for opposing wide receiver ones. So I think we can tell two clear stories here. The first is, all right, maybe Brees Hall and Braylon Allen outperform, and Garrett Wilson goes under his receiving prop, but also very similar story to Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow last night. We have a situation here where you can potentially correlate less than on Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson, more than on either Alan Lazard or Mike Williams, and kind of break the pattern that everybody else is using. And so if that comes to fruition, not only are you going 3 for 3 on those three guys, but you're doing so in a way that you might be going 3 for 3, 6 for 6, whatever at on a slate where very, very few are, and you're getting that huge payout.
Yeah, people almost always click mores, and these numbers are kind of low, so it's even harder to click less. One thing people really don't want to click on a less is like less than 20 yards.
Yeah,
it's like that's just one play,
right?
So I think there's going to be more selections once we know Shakir's status. I think they'll put him up. They'll put, because there's just very few receivers up there right now on the Buffalo side, especially on receptions. But I think people are going to basically be clicking more in general on this thing. So that's generally how it is, but that's especially tonight, I think. And I don't know if people are going to correlate a ton, but I don't think they're going to be loath to correlate a lot of unders on a quarterback because some of the numbers with it are so low. Like, do they really want to click under 201, under 31.5, under 37.5? It just seems so low. And I'm not necessarily saying you need to do that because we just talked about how sometimes it doesn't play clean like that. So you could just do like Josh Allen 1 and 1 of his receivers or whatever, and then try to find just random other.
Oh, we lost TwoGun again. TwoGun, if you can still hear me, you have frozen just like you did yesterday. So maybe just hop out and come back in. And in the meantime, I will talk through some of these other picks. By the way, anyone watching along, if you're in the YouTube chat and you want us to talk through a pick that you like, we're more than happy to do so. So just toss some ideas into the chat there. I think so. The ones that I've already talked through, I like the Rodgers less than I like the Wilson less than I probably like either Mike Williams or Alan Lazard more than. Looks like TwoGun has returned.
I mean, it's just how it is nowadays. You just lose me for like a period of time. It seems like I don't know where I was in my rant. It's kind of like I'm like that old guy that's just like, you just turn him off, like let him rant like to himself, let him get it out. Exactly. We'll bring him back when he's got it out of the system.
Maybe. Hey, do you have any picks? I know we are waiting on the Shakir news, but are there any picks that you already really like on the Buffalo side?
I'm definitely very much on the unders. Our thing, I believe our pick 6 tool loves Josh Allen under pass yards. And I kind of like it too. I'm going to try to look at some of my picks real fast because I feel like generally more of my picks are on the Jet side that I kind of like feel a little bit more strongly about. Because I just in general don't love any of the picks on the Buffalo side.
Yep.
Here or there. I kind of like if they have more receptions, maybe more like an under stacking the unders on Josh Allen completions and pass and catches. I think one thing that people will use a lot that no one's going to go over on or under on is James Cook receptions or James Cook reception yards. I think people will be afraid to do that. I kind of like that.
Yeah, let me see. So this is. Oh wait, I'm looking at the wrong thing. I need the Jets. Jets. Where are you? The Jets are 15th in DVOA allowed to running backs in the passing game, so it's pretty neutral matchup there. But if you're looking at the DVOA adjusted fantasy points against data, the Jets are just about the worst matchup for almost anybody. Second worst quarterback matchup at negative 42%, running backs negative 10%. That is eighth worst matchup. Wide receivers as a whole, the third worst. Wide receiver ones are negative 32%, negative 10% for wide receiver twos, negative 38% for wide receiver threes. It's also really bad for tight ends at negative 48%. That is the second worst matchup. So all across the board, fantasy production goes to die against the New York Jets. So I very much like the unders as well for most of these Bills. And I think I will be probably mixing and matching a lot of Bills picks with the core that I like so much on the New York side.
Yeah. Yeah. In general, most of my picks are unders with kind of overs on the Jets running backs, which really kind of goes in line with our DVOA data.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to just make lots of random picks that are correlated and make sense and just kind of take stands on these island games.
Mm-hmm.
Like it makes sense. Like, you know, if you want to do a shootout and do like overs on Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers make a show, it actually makes total sense. And I'm not going to knock it at all. I'm just not going to do it because the payout's going to suck if it hits. Mm-hmm. And one thing I've learned from paying pick six, the payout is all that matters. I'm not going to say the payout's pretty much all that fucking matters.
It
really matters more than anything. Like I've had times where I've gone 6 out of 6s and I lost money because I had so many different picks and everyone else won and I was getting the minimums. And I just couldn't. You just can't turn a profit when you're only getting 10x on a 6 out of 6.
Mm-hmm.
If you get that 40x, that's how you make money. Like you need those big juicy payouts to make money at this thing. And the way you make money is either you go contrarian or you have to hope everyone else does really, really bad picks and doesn't correlate on the main slate. And from what I can tell, they're not doing it, but still they sometimes will win. So anyways, I'm just gearing towards I'm taking a stand with a variety of unders and with the running back or with some running back overs though, especially on the Jets.
TwoGun, we have this question here. How do we feel about Breece Hall over 13 rush attempts? So pick six doesn't have rush attempts as one of them, but I do think there are a lot of really good things that you can choose for Breece Hall. Rushing yards, 57.5, I do like. I will say I probably am leaning, though, to rushing plus receiving yards because as good of a matchup as it is for running backs as a whole, a lot of that is coming from the fact that Buffalo has been 32nd in DVOA allowed to running backs in the passing game. So Hall, more than 88.5 rushing plus receiving, I think is probably my preferred route.
Yeah, another thing you can do is if you think they're going to run the ball a lot, you take the overs on the yards and you take under on Aaron Rodgers' attempts. It's kind of a way to play that. And I'm doing that a good amount.
Exactly. Yeah, I wish there was air yards for a quarterback. I would love that so much. Like Aaron Rodgers, more or less than 275.5 air yards, because number one, that would correlate so well. But number two, like we have such great data from Stats Hub on how much too high or single high a team is playing, the average depth of target they're allowing, and all that stuff. This seems like another one of those games where Rodgers is going to have to get rid of the ball quickly and throw it pretty short for the most part. And then like a lot of the stuff is just going to be through the running backs, I think. So I would have loved to have that option on this one. But one of the things that I've noticed people like to go to is interceptions. Have you found the same in the data that you have looked at? And are you seeing a lean to people going more than 0.5 interceptions or less than 0.5?
Interceptions. I think it depends on the slate, but I don't think that's generally a popular one. Let's see, like last night, 69 people chose interceptions over and 16 did under. So yeah, obviously people are going to generally pick over. They're almost never going to pick an interception under.
Yeah.
Um,
Which I think is a pretty interesting one on tonight's slate because we have, let me see here, we have Josh Allen, who hasn't thrown an interception yet this year. He's thrown 5 turnover-worthy throws, which is tied for 15th best, so not very turnover-worthy there. Rodgers, historically very low in the interception department. He has thrown 4 this season, but he's only thrown 4 interception-worthy passes, so it's extremely rare that you see as many interceptions as interception-worthy throws. So the fact that he's there, like, that screams regression for one thing, but it also just means he's only thrown 4 interception-worthy balls so far this year. Good chance he doesn't throw one tonight. And if we are assuming that there's a lot of success on the ground, that could be pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that I think if you're gearing for that weirder night, it's something you can take as a pick. That's not a perfect correlation, right? But it does go well. And I do think, like, I'll sometimes do these blowout picks where instead of let's just say teams blowing out another team, like I did some of these that I think some of them actually hit or close to it, like with the Dallas game, and I would have taken a Dak over on interceptions, and then like a over on David Montgomery, and an under on Goff attempts. But I think I took under on CeeDee Lamb yards, and that screwed me or something like that. You see, instead of doing it on yards, it's almost like you're saying the quarterback's going to be throwing it at the end of the game a lot, and he's going to maybe get an interception. So it goes well with like rushing yards on the other team's over and stuff like that.
Yep. Here's another thought, another kind of interesting angle for tonight's slate. If you remember way back in week 1, you had a 6 for 6 paid out over 100x, in large part because Christian McCaffrey was ruled out. As soon as that happened, the Deebo Samuel rushing plus receiving yard line, all of that went way up. What do you think about trying to get ahead of that tonight by maybe you go more than 3.5 Dalton Kincaid receptions, or more than, what's his receiving yards at? More than 38.5 receiving yards for Dalton Kincaid, with in mind the idea that, hey, if Khalil Shakir ends up missing the game, those are probably going to increase. And then maybe you could take, less on, maybe he goes up to 45.5 and 5.5 receptions or something like that. Now you flip it, you take less than, and you're kind of set either way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do a little bit. I'm generally on Kincaid unders just because I'm taking unders on Josh Allen. I also think Shakir is probably going to play.
I do too.
It's just you're never going to get the insane movements that like a CMC not playing changes things so much, right? Like Shakir, like let's just not overthink Khalil Shakir. When they say he's in, Kincaid's might go down to 37.5 or 36.5. I mean, or it may not even move. I think they probably expect Shakir to play. They just don't want to put him up there, is my guess.
I think my favorite of the less than that's up so far is Keon Coleman, 31.5. Again, this Jets matchup I just think is horrific for him. And he's also one of those guys, like I think that a lot of people like to just click on the player. So here you see, oh, he's gone around 50 in each of the last 2. This number is really, really low for him, only 31.5. He's been getting in the 50s. The only time he didn't get there recently was in week 3 when he was basically disciplined for an entire first quarter and benched. So I think he's going to be a fairly popular more than selection because of how low this number is. So what do you think of the Keon Coleman less than play here?
I think in general, people are not going to want to click on these Bills under or Bills lesses because the number is just too high. They had a James Cook reception yards of 15.5, and I bet you everyone was clicking more except for me. I clicked a little bit of both. I didn't always just do less, by the way. I did a little bit of both. But that's more than anything. Like people are just not going to click on a less on. They'll generally click on less on like receptions. Like I can see them clicking on less than 3.5 Kincaid receptions. But they're not going to click less on Tyler Conklin. I can tell you that. Or Brees Hall, or even Mike Williams. Like, I don't know. They're probably not going to click on any of the Jets less.
I think another one in that spirit is going to Dawson Knox less than 8.5, because you said it earlier. It's like nobody wants to make a pick that can lose on the very first play of the game, right? But if you look at it, hey, he's gone less than 8.5 in 4 consecutive games. So like the probability is almost certainly with you, and yet you kind of know people aren't going to click it just because it's such an unfun click.
Yeah, that might be the best click out of all of them.
It might be. All right. How about kicking points? Because this is one that we seem to agree that people are clicking more way too often. So part one is, do you agree with that? And then part two is, do you find that a less on kicking points correlates well with anything else?
Yeah, I think people just click on it too much. I don't think it correlates well with much. I just don't think it correlates well with anything. Remember, it's kicking points, it's not fantasy points. Yep. So you're basically saying they need 2 field goals and a touchdown. I think it's one of those things where if you really know the head coaches well, and you know are they going to go more for it on 4th down, or are they going to try to kick a field goal? Like it gets a little bit more into football theory, I think. I don't know enough about the head coaches to really make a guess, and I just think in general, it's not something I really want to use. I'm using it less and less. I really just almost never use the kicker.
I think the only time that I have found a lot of success using the kicker is when I'm taking less than on touchdowns for guys. Now, I don't necessarily want to do that on either Brees Hall or James Cook, but I think one of the games early this season, it's like you have to know that a touchdown pick is going to be really popular. I think I felt pretty strongly about no touchdown for Travis Kelce in one game. I also went to no touchdown for Malik Neighbors in that island game against the Cowboys, and I paired that with more than kicking points. And so, yes, I'm probably going with the chalkier kicker pick, but I'm leveraging a pick that I think is going to be really popular because people do like to take touchdowns. And it's another one of those instances where people don't like to take no touchdown. They want to take a guy to score a touchdown so they have that moment where they can celebrate their guy scoring. So if you can leverage those touchdown picks, I think that generally works pretty well too.
Yeah, I mean, I like yeah. It's just sometimes they give it to you and sometimes they don't. Like sometimes they'll have passing touchdowns and the receiver. Mm-hmm. And if it's 1.5 passing touchdowns and a receiver, well, then you can take the kicking points under because they got 2 touchdowns. You really think they're going to get 2 touchdowns and 2 field goals, or but like tonight they don't. So
agree with that. All right, time to talk Showdown. I kind of teased this at the beginning of the show. It's very much in my article. If you've read my Showdown article, you know exactly what I'm going to say here tonight. But this strikes me as one of the most straightforward Showdown slates that we have had all season. The main reason for that being, let me bring up this optimal data. In each Showdown article that we write, we post data from our simulations that show how often the breakdown is for each team and the number of players from that team. So, for example, the optimal rate tonight of 3 Bills and 3 Jets, 21%. 2 Bills, 4 Jets, 27%. 1 Bill, 5 Jets, 30.2%. I have never seen an instance where the optimal rate was highest on a 5-1 onslaught, let alone for a game like this where both teams are pretty even. And in fact, we're probably suggesting that we go with the onslaught on the worst team. Now, our betting model does show an edge for the Jets, and I think that's the missing ingredient here, right? That's the thing that explains why this is the case. It's that we actually think the Jets should be favored here, where pricing on this slate suggests that the Bills should be favored, and the Bills are going to do all the scoring. So number one, I guess, question for you, TwoGun, would be, what do you think of all that optimal data? Are you kind of reading the slate in the same way that we want to be?
Oh, I read y'all's optimal. I mean, I try to actually read y'all's article before I make my Showdown lineups, especially if I don't have a strong opinion yet.
Mhm.
because I generally don't like using the running back and the captain, but it makes sense to use the running back and the captain when you're doing
Yeah.
a 5-1.
And that was sort of
you
the thing that really struck me about the player level data. To your point, almost every single slate we've had this year, we have shown the running backs as really bad captain plays. In other words, we've shown their simulated optimal rate to be well below their projected ownership in the captain spot. Brees Hall, though, 32% projected optimal rate, 27% projected captain ownership. So even as the most popular captain on the slate, we are showing that he's a really good play. If that were to fall below that, it would just become even better. And personally, I think there's a good chance he is more like 15 or 20% in the captain spot, because I think people are pretty afraid of the Braylon Allen usage. So I love the Brees Hall captain pick tonight. And it works so perfectly that it's perfectly correlated with the type of build I want to do overall as well.
Yeah. It's funny how it is like kind of, I'm not saying Brees Hall's contrarian, but yeah, people are probably shying off of it on the wrong time because of, they're afraid that he's going to get split. What was I trying to think? Yeah, people like, I noticed that even though like the Bills are getting bet on far more than the Jets, and people they just deep down think that the Jets are a much worse team than the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just think this is more like a 7-point spread. And I just think they're going to find ways to. No one really wants to do a 5-1 Jets. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, we have an interesting question here. If James Cook is out, who's projecting higher, Ty Johnson or Ray Davis? So I think the very first thing is both TwoGun and I are going to answer this in a similar way, in the sense that we don't look a ton at projections. We care about the overall range of outcomes, and we care about the correlation of the players. What I feel most strongly about here is we can classify Ty Johnson and Ray Davis in two very different categories. I think Ty Johnson, number one, is going to be the first to get the pass down role, and he's also the guy that they're going to trust the most. Trust when they just need time burned and they don't want to fumble. They're going to trust him to pick up the blocking assignments in the passing game, all that sort of stuff, where Ray Davis might be the guy who, hey, if they are in a rhythm offensively and they're moving the Jets defensive line and they're running the ball really well, it's more likely to be Ray Davis. So it's not about who projects better for me. It's understanding the game scripts in which each one can actually succeed, and then following that when you're making your choice.
He seems to think that James Cook's out, but my other understanding was that he's far more likely to play.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because DraftKings has him up on pick 6, and they don't have Shakir. So I tend to not. I have a very strong opinion of not thinking about things unless they happen. I don't like. I hate playing the what if game.
Well, I'll push back a little bit there, because I think there's value in trying to anticipate so that you're not, in a crash course to make your lineups in the last 15 minutes if that news breaks late. But Daniel's like, here, you're saying you need actual numbers because if Cook is out, you're going to use an optimizer to build these. I think that's the wrong approach. I think the way that I would be preparing for this news is building player groups such that I'm getting each of the running backs in the correct lineups. So making rules that, if I have Brees Hall captain, then I want Ty Johnson. If I don't have Brees Hall, then I want Ray Davis. Things of that nature, where you're pointing to a game script first and then telling the optimizer to pick second based on that game script that you're assuming.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I also don't use the opto for showdowns because I don't do 150 showdown lineups. I do anywhere from 1 to 5. I'm more likely to do a ton of lineups for main slate.
I like
it's guys that do 150 showdown lineups. I guess so I'm not going to hate on it.
It's interesting. I think there are so many ways that you can use the optimizer to help. I like using the optimizer for showdowns because sometimes it's really hard for me to kind of comprehend value. Like, for example, on a main slate, I know what people are asking for from a 5.5K running back, right? On a showdown, I don't necessarily know what people are asking for from an $8,500 running back versus a $13,000 receiver or something like that. And so I like using the optimizer to just kind of get a better feel for how important different price discrepancies are. Things of that nature helps me predict single entry ownership, things like that. And so I do still think there's plenty of value in the optimizer, but I'm with you. I'm not out there building lineups for Showdown with the optimizer because I am a single entry guy. So,
and also point out that Ray Davis, I believe, is what, 3,000, so he's almost free.
yeah.
And Ty Johnson is 5,200. So I don't know. It's gonna be tough to not use Ray Davis. I'll leave it at that. But
Daniels, this is a great approach that you're using, and I think it reinforces my thought that you're already making a ton of groups and rules. Just make them for Ty Johnson and Ray Davis as well. You don't have to have the projections nailed down for them, but I would also say they're going to combine for probably something like 60 to 70% of the overall production that we're projecting for James Cook, maybe a little bit higher than that because Ty Johnson can be so effective in the passing game. So that's probably where I would put it. All right, let's see. Any other Showdown thoughts? Any cheap guys that you really like on tonight's Showdown slate, TwoGun?
No. I mean, I think the cheapest one I'm using right now, well, I guess the Jets defense is actually a cheap guy at 3,600.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing it'll be chalky, but maybe it won't be. I don't know. I think it depends. Again, if he's right and James Cook's out, that changes everything because there's going to be so much Ray Davis, 3,000. All of a sudden, you can afford all the studs. It just changes everything with all your lineups.
Yeah, I don't think that the Jets are going to be chalky by any means.
I
I don't think either defense is going to be, and we've kind of seen that all season. Defenses just haven't been chalky. Typically, when we see defenses get chalky is when we have a major spread and 5-1 lineups are actually popular. Then people like to go to the defense, but we haven't really had that on any of the island games recently, and I don't think we'll have it tonight in what should be another pretty even.
I think you're probably right, but I do like the Jets defense. I know Josh Allen hasn't thrown a pick this year, but he's due. And this Jets defense good, and look at the Jets defense. They put up points every game. They're they're kind of a high pressure defense. So
I think another point on the defensive ownership is a lot of it just depends on what skill players down there are popular. So for example, if there's no James Cook, now all of a sudden people are going to Ray Davis and Ty Johnson. It's going to be a lot harder to get to a defense. If there's no Khalil Shakir, people are going to go to Curtis Samuel. They're going to go to maybe MVS a little bit, but mostly Mac Hollins. And again, it's going to be harder for people to get to the
Tyler
defense.
Conklin at 4,000 basically takes out the Jets defense.
Yes, 100%. 100%.
I don't like Tyler Conklin, but whenever I don't like Tyler Conklin is when he gets 6 catches. So it's just it's Tyler Conklin.
All right, I've got one final question for you. I am looking at our projected ownership for Braylon Allen in the flex, $5,400, 33% owned. I think both things can be true, where Breece Hall is as popular as we have him projected, and Braylon Allen is as popular as we have him projected. If both of those are true, how often do you think people are playing both of them together?
I don't know, but I have them together in one of my lineups. I'll leave it at that. I tend to like Breece Hall more as a captain than Braylon Allen as a captain because he's a higher ceiling. The only reason you have Braylon Allen as a captain over Breece Hall is you want to just afford more people. You want to afford higher stakes people, but I think Breece Hall has the higher thing. It goes well with a Jets leading the game type game script because if the Jets are leading the game, guess who you think they're just going to be airing it out to all the time? Hell no, they're just going to be handing the ball off. They have a new head coach who would be so happy to win, and I feel like coaches tend to be more conservative. When they're new, just so they don't look stupid. I don't know anything about the new Jets head coach, but I just think if the Jets get a lead, they're going to be just ramming it down their throats, and they'll use both those guys.
Yeah. We actually had a couple similar situations yesterday. This guy's pointing to the fact that Tyrone Tracy was the best captain last night. I think you can. Like last night's game has no impact on tonight's in that sense, but we did get another instance of big backup running back performance yesterday in the Tampa game. Sean Tucker had a massive game, was in the Millie optimal and the Millie winner at like 0.04% or something crazy like that. So it's doable.
Yeah, I've seen games where it doesn't have to be a high scoring game. It's just some games are rushing games, and this game seems like it's destined to be a rushing game one way or another.
It's also just very touchdown dependent, right? If there are only 3 touchdowns in the game, Brees Hall has 2 and Braylon Allen has another one. They're both going to be optimal. One's probably the optimal captain. So very important to note that. All right. Any closing thoughts before we jump out of here?
No, not really. This guy's got me thinking, like, I guess we really got to check inactives because it's going to change things up. But, think through your lineups and, just kind of think through a game script and have it make sense.
Yeah, as always. And both projections and projected ownership will be updated once inactives come through. We will both be in the Discord talking through our finalized plans for tonight's showdown. So we'll catch you there. And it seems like we had a lot of new viewers tonight. So appreciate all of you guys hopping in here, kind of talking through the slate with us. Hopefully we made you guys better DFS players and pick 6 players from this show. That's kind of our goal each and every time. We're not just trying to help you win the individual slate, but we're trying to help you win all slates into the future. So we will be back for free once again Thursday, 5:30 Eastern, Thursday Night Football, as well as the main slate Week 7 breakdown. So we will catch you then. Thanks for tuning in.